Story 1. I've been deaf since birth, but I've never let it define who I am or limit what I can achieve. Growing up in a small town, my parents were determined to give me every opportunity possible. They moved us closer to a specialized school when I was 5, taking on extra jobs to afford the relocation. My mom learned sign language before I could even walk, and my dad wasn't far behind. They made sure I knew that being deaf wasn't a disability, it was just a different way of experiencing the world. Throughout school, I excelled in mathematics and computer science. The logical, visual nature of coding seemed to click with how my brain worked. While some kids were struggling with their first Hello World programs, I was already building simple games. My teachers recognized my potential and encouraged me to pursue software development. Now, at 28, I'm a senior developer at a tech company that's known for its inclusive workplace culture. My workplace is exceptional when it comes to accessibility. When I first joined 3 years ago, the entire development team voluntarily enrolled in sign language classes. Now, most of my colleagues can hold basic conversations in sign language, and our meetings always have an interpreter present. Even our company-wide events are designed to be inclusive for everyone. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. My morning routine has been the same for the past 2 years. I wake up at 6 a.m., go for a run, shower, and then head to this cozy coffee shop near my office at precisely 7:30 a.m. It's a locally owned place with dark wood furnishings and large windows that let in the morning sun. The staff there has become like a second family to me. When I first started going there, I would show my order on my phone. But the owner, a kind-hearted woman in her 50s, took it upon herself to learn sign language. Soon, her entire staff followed suit. They've learned not just how to sign my usual order large Americano with an extra shot, but also how to have simple conversations about the weather, weekend plans, and the latest coffee beans they're trying out. They always make sure to face me directly when speaking so I can try to read their lips if needed, though they know signing is more reliable. This particular morning started like any other, but it would turn out to be anything but routine. I was standing in line, scrolling through work emails on my phone, mentally preparing for a big project meeting later that day. The shop was busier than usual, with about 10 people in line ahead of me. That's when I felt someone tapping on my shoulder. I turned around to see a woman in her 40s, wearing an expensive-looking business suit and sporting a perfectly coiffed hairdo. She was trying to talk to me, her lips moving rapidly, but I couldn't quite make out what she was saying. Her expression seemed friendly enough, so I politely smiled and turned back around, assuming she might have been commenting on the long line or something equally mundane. That's when things started to go downhill. She tapped my shoulder again, more aggressively this time. The sharp jab of her manicured nails was impossible to ignore. I turned around once more, and her previously friendly expression had transformed into one of obvious irritation. "Karen, hello? I'm talking to you. Are you just going to ignore me like that? Don't you have any manners?" I pointed to my ear and shook my head, trying to indicate that I couldn't hear her. I even made the universal sign for deaf that most hearing people recognize. But instead of understanding, she just got more agitated. "Karen, don't you know it's rude to ignore people? I just wanted to ask if you come here often because I've seen you before. You're quite handsome, and I thought we could have coffee together." I tried to gesture again that I couldn't hear her, even pulling out my phone to type an explanation, but she wasn't having any of it. Her face was getting redder by the second, and other customers were starting to notice the commotion. That's when she grabbed my shoulder, not just a tap this time, but a firm grip, and physically tried to turn me around. The barista, who had been watching this unfold with increasing concern, immediately came over. "Barista, ma'am, please don't touch him. He's deaf and cannot hear you." "Karen, that's ridiculous. I've seen him here before, talking to you all. He responds to his orders just fine." "Barista, we use sign language to communicate with him. All our staff has learned basic signing to help our deaf customers." "Karen, well, he can read lips, can't he? There's no excuse for being so rude. Besides, I've seen deaf people talk before. He's obviously faking it to avoid talking to me." The barista, who who I'll always be grateful to, tried explaining that lip reading isn't 100% accurate and that I wasn't being rude. She even demonstrated some basic sign language to prove her point. But Karen was getting more worked up by the second. She kept trying to get in my face, forcing me to look at her while she was speaking. The barista had to physically step between us. Several other customers were now openly staring at the scene unfolding before them. A few had their phones out, recording the incident. I could see some of them signing to me in basic signs they knew, offering support and asking if I was okay. That's when Karen pulled out her phone, her face contorted with rage. "Karen, fine. If you want to play deaf and harass me, I'm calling the police. This is a hate crime." The barista and other customers tried to reason with her, but she was already dialing 911. I could see her dramatically gesturing while she spoke into the phone, pointing at me repeatedly. The barista quickly wrote on a notepad explaining what was happening, and I nodded to show I understood. Another customer, who knew basic sign language, signed to me that everything would be okay. About 10 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived. Karen immediately started gesturing wildly at me, her face triumphant as if she'd finally caught a criminal. But one of the officers noticed the barista signing to me and quickly understood the situation. As luck would have it, they both happened to know basic sign language from their training with the local deaf community. Officer 1. "Ma'am, this gentleman is actually deaf. We can verify this." "Karen, he's faking it. I demand you arrest him for harassment. He's been ignoring me on purpose and making me look foolish." Officer 2. "The only person harassing anyone here is you. We've received the security footage from the shop showing you grabbing him. That could be considered assault." The officers then signed to me, asking if I wanted to press charges for assault. While I was tempted, given her behavior, I declined but indicated I would appreciate if she was kept away from the shop. The shop owner, who had arrived during the commotion, was already ahead of me. "Shop owner, you're permanently banned from this establishment. If you return, we will press charges for trespassing. We have a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind." Karen tried to argue, but the officers firmly escorted her out. As they were leaving, I could see her having a complete meltdown in the parking lot, gesturing at the shop and trying to convince the officers to come back in. Instead, they made her leave the premises entirely, and I later learned they gave her a stern warning about misusing emergency services. The aftermath of this incident was surprisingly positive. The shop owner gave me my coffee for free that day, and even better, they've started offering free sign language classes to their regular customers every Sunday afternoon. The incident went viral on social media, with several deaf advocacy groups sharing the video to raise awareness about the importance of deaf culture and the misconceptions about lip reading. Every morning now, I get a few more people practicing their signing with me, and my coffee shop visits have become even more enjoyable than before. The regulars have formed a small community, and we often have signed conversations while waiting in line. Even some of the police officers who responded that day have become regular customers, and they always make a point to practice their signing with me. As for Karen, I heard through the grapevine that she tried to post her version of events on social media, claiming discrimination, but the videos of the incident quickly shut that down. She was reportedly seen at a coffee shop across town, but this time she keeps to herself. Story 2. I work as a travel agent, and after years of helping others plan their dream vacations, I finally decided to treat myself to a luxury cruise. Nothing too extravagant, just a simple economy cabin for a week-long Caribbean cruise. I'd saved up for months, and even though I could have squeezed my budget for a better cabin, I was perfectly happy with my choice. After all, I knew I'd be spending most of my time exploring the ship and ports anyway. Everything started smoothly. I boarded the ship, found my cabin, and spent the first day familiarizing myself with the layout. Being a travel agent, I knew exactly what amenities came with my ticket and what areas were reserved for different cabin classes. That's why what happened next was so surreal. I was relaxing by the main pool when I first noticed her, a woman in her 50s, who would soon become the nightmare of every crew member on board. Let's call her Karen, because that's exactly who she was. Karen was arguing with a pool attendant, her voice getting progressively louder. Karen, what do you mean this isn't the premium section? Do you know how much I paid for this cruise? Pool attendant, ma'am, this is the general pool area. The premium sun deck is located on deck 12, but that's reserved for first-class passengers. Karen, this is ridiculous. I'm a paying customer. I demand to speak to your supervisor. I watched as the pool attendant calmly radioed for his supervisor, but Karen wasn't done. She stormed off toward the premium sun deck anyway. I followed at a distance, partly out of curiosity and partly because I was heading to the cafe nearby. When I reached the upper deck, Karen was already making a scene. She had planted herself on a premium lounge chair, right next to a gentleman who was clearly a first-class passenger, judging by his access card lanyard. First-class passenger, excuse me, but I believe you're in my wife's chair. Her belongings were right here. Karen, I don't see any belongings. This chair is empty. That's when I noticed something disturbing. Karen was smirking while glancing toward the ocean. The first-class passenger's face turned red with anger as he realized what had happened. First-class passenger, did you throw my wife's things overboard? Karen, I have no idea what you're talking about. Now leave me alone before I report you for harassment. By this time, the deck supervisor had arrived with 2 security officers. Deck supervisor, ma'am, we've checked your cabin number. You have an economy class ticket, which doesn't grant access to this area. I'll have to ask you to return to the main deck. Karen, do you have any idea who I am? I'll have your job for this. I've never been so insulted in my life. She pulled out her phone and started recording. Karen, I'm documenting everything. This is discrimination. I paid good money for this cruise, and I'm being treated like a second-class citizen. Security officer, ma'am, if you don't return to the authorized areas, we'll have to escort you to your cabin. Karen, go ahead, call the captain. I demand to speak to him. This whole cruise line will regret this. Well, she got her wish. The captain did come, but not in the way she expected. I watched as he arrived, his face stern and professional. Captain, ma'am, I've been informed of multiple incidents involving you today, including the destruction of another passenger's property. This behavior is unacceptable. Karen, finally, someone in charge. Captain, I've been emotionally traumatized by your staff's treatment. I demand a full refund, an upgrade to a first-class cabin, and a free future cruise as compensation. The captain's response was priceless. Captain, here's what's going to happen instead. You will be confined to your original cabin for the remainder of this cruise, except for meals at designated times in the main dining room. Security will escort you. Upon return to port, you will be presented with a bill for the passenger's destroyed belongings, and you are hereby banned from all future cruises with our line. Karen, you can't do this to me. I'll sue. I'll ruin this entire cruise line. Captain, security, please escort this passenger to her cabin. And ma'am, please be aware that your behavior has been documented and will be reported to other cruise lines as well. I watched as security led her away, still screaming about lawsuits and discrimination. The captain personally apologized to the first-class passenger and arranged for immediate compensation for the lost belongings. The rest of the cruise was surprisingly peaceful. Karen was only seen during her designated meal times, accompanied by security, looking significantly deflated. But the best part came when we returned to port. As we disembarked, I happened to be behind her when she was handed an itemized bill for over $5,000 worth of destroyed belongings, including a designer handbag, a smartphone, and prescription sunglasses. The cruise line had also added fees for security personnel and documentation of incidents. Karen, this is extortion. I won't pay a penny. Customer service representative, that's your choice, ma'am. However, our legal team has already been provided with all documentation, including security footage of you throwing the items overboard. They're prepared to proceed with legal action if necessary. The look on her face was priceless as she realized her emotional trauma story wouldn't hold up against video evidence. Last I heard, she tried to dispute the charges on her credit card, but the cruise line's documentation was too thorough. She ended up having to pay every cent, and rumor has it she's now blacklisted from most major cruise lines. As for me, I got a fantastic story to share with my clients about why it's important to book the cabin class you can afford and respect the rules that come with it. The cruise line even offered me a discount on my next booking for providing a detailed witness statement about the incidents. Story 3. I never thought I'd end up in a situation like this when I decided to move back to civilian life. After 15 years of service and 2 tours in Afghanistan, the last thing I needed was to deal with entitled civilians who think they own the world. But here we are. I'm a disabled veteran, lost the use of my legs during my second tour when our convoy hit an improvised explosive device. It took me 3 years of physical therapy and mental health treatment to get to a point where I felt ready to live independently again. The Department of Veterans Affairs helped me find this perfect little house in a quiet suburb. Single story, good layout for wheelchair accessibility, and most importantly affordable on my pension and disability benefits. The modifications I needed weren't extensive, just a wheelchair ramp leading to the front door and a porch lift for when the weather makes the ramp too slippery. The Department of Veterans Affairs covered the costs, and I had all the proper permits from the city. The contractors were professional and finished the work within a week. That's when I met her, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood. Let's call her Karen, because that's exactly what she was. It was my 3rd day in the house when she first showed up at my door. Karen, excuse me. What do you think you're doing to this beautiful neighborhood? Me, I'm sorry. What? Karen, these modifications, they're absolutely hideous. They're ruining the aesthetic of our street. Me, ma'am, I'm a disabled veteran. I need these to access my home. Karen, I don't care if you're the president. I'm the head of the Home Owners Association, and these modifications weren't approved by the board. Me, there must be some mistake. This neighborhood doesn't have an HOA. I checked before buying the house. Karen, well, I'm starting one. And as the president, I'm fining you $500 for unauthorized modifications. She actually pulled out a piece of paper that looked like it was printed at home, trying to make it look official. Me, ma'am, you can't just create an HOA and retroactively fine people. That's not how it works. Karen, we'll see about that. Remove these eyesores within 48 hours, or the fines will double. I closed the door on her face. I thought that would be the end of it. But boy, was I wrong. The next day, I found a stack of violation notices stuffed in my mailbox. Each one listed a different made-up infraction, from unauthorized construction to degradation of neighborhood aesthetics. The total fines added up to over $3,000. I ignored them, of course. But then things started getting serious. She filed multiple complaints with the city about unauthorized construction. The city inspector came out, checked my permits, and cleared everything. But Karen wasn't done. One day, my security cameras, which I'd installed because of my military training, always be prepared, caught her trying to convince a contractor to remove my ramp and lift. Karen, look, I'll pay you cash. Just take it all down and haul it away. He's at work now, so there won't be any problems. Contractor, lady, that's destruction of property. It's illegal. Karen, I'm the HOA president. I have the authority. Contractor, this neighborhood doesn't have an HOA. I'm leaving, and you should too before I report you. But she didn't stop there. My cameras caught her measuring the ramp and lift multiple times, talking on the phone with different contractors. She even tried to get a group of neighborhood teenagers to help her dismantle the ramp, promising to pay them $1.50 each. That's when I decided enough was enough. I took all my evidence, the fake violation notices, security camera footage, and a detailed log of all her harassment to the police. They were extremely interested, especially when they saw the footage of her trying to hire people to destroy my property. The police charged her with criminal harassment, attempted property damage, and trespassing. But that was just the beginning. My lawyer helped me file a civil lawsuit against her for harassment, attempted property damage, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. The court proceedings were almost comical. Judge: Ma'am, you're claiming you had the authority to issue these fines. Karen: Yes, Your Honor, as the president of the HOA. Judge: The HOA that doesn't exist. Karen: I created it, and HOA rules override regular laws. The judge actually laughed out loud. Judge: Ma'am, that's not how any of this works. You can't create an HOA unilaterally, and even legitimate HOAs must comply with federal laws, including the Americans with Disabilities Act. Karen: But the property values, the aesthetics. Judge: The only thing affecting property values here is your criminal behavior. The judge ruled entirely in my favor. Karen was ordered to pay $150,000 in damages for harassment, attempted property damage, and violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. She was also slapped with a permanent restraining order. The best part? She had to sell her house to pay the damages. Turns out she had been living beyond her means, trying to maintain this facade of being the neighborhood queen. The bank foreclosed on her house when she couldn't keep up with the payments after paying my damages. Last I heard, she had to move in with her adult daughter in another state. The neighbors threw a block party the day she left. Turns out, I wasn't the only one she'd been harassing. I was just the first one to stand up to her with solid evidence. These days, the neighborhood is peaceful. My new neighbors are friendly and supportive. Some of them even helped me plant a garden in my front yard, complete with raised beds I can tend from my wheelchair. The ramp and lift are still here, doing their job perfectly, and nobody complains about the aesthetics anymore. The only aesthetic that really got ruined was Karen's perfect little fantasy world where she thought she was above the law. But I guess that's what happens when you mess with someone who's been trained to document everything and always be prepared. Story 4. I never thought my passion for baking would lead to such drama, but here we are. I'm a 16-year-old who's been baking since I was tall enough to reach the kitchen counter. My grandmother owned a small bakery, and I practically grew up there, learning all her secrets and techniques. When she passed away last year, she left me her entire collection of recipes, including her famous vanilla bean cake with honey buttercream frosting. This recipe became my signature, and after months of practice, I finally felt ready to enter the Spring County Fair's Junior Division baking competition. I spent weeks perfecting my decorating technique, practicing piping, and getting the sugar flours just right. The theme was Spring Garden, and I created this 3-tiered masterpiece with hand-painted butterflies, delicate sugar flowers in pastel colors, and these amazing crystallized edible flowers that took me forever to get right. The morning of the competition, I arrived early with my mom. She helped me set up my station and gave me a quick hug before heading to the craft exhibition where she was showing her quilts. The Junior Division competition was broadcast live on the local community channel, something they'd started doing to encourage young bakers. I'm so nervous. What if the judges don't like it? My mom: They'll love it, honey. You've worked so hard on this. The judging took about 2 hours. When they announced the winners, I couldn't believe it. I'd won first place. The judges praised my technical skills and said the cake looked professional. The awards ceremony wasn't until 4 p.m., so I left my cake on display and went to grab lunch with my mom. When we came back, my cake was gone. At first, I thought maybe they'd moved it for the ceremony, but then I saw my cake was in the professional division display area. A woman in her 40s was standing next to it, accepting compliments from passers-by. I rushed over immediately. Excuse me, that's my cake. I made it for the Junior Division. Karen: Excuse me. This is my cake. I spent days working on it. No, you didn't. I literally just won first place with it in the Junior Division. Karen: Listen, little girl. I know you probably saw my recipe online and tried to copy it, but this is my original creation. I'm a professional baker with 20 years of experience. That's impossible. This is my grandmother's recipe. I have proof it was broadcast live this morning. Karen, oh please, you probably saw me making it on the live stream and are trying to take credit. Security, this girl is harassing me. By this point, a small crowd had gathered. My mom arrived with one of the competition organizers. Competition organizer, what seems to be the problem here? Karen, this teenager is trying to claim my cake. I've been baking professionally for decades. Just look at the quality. No teenager could produce this level of work. Competition organizer, ma'am, we literally watched this young lady make this cake on our live broadcast this morning. Her name is right here on the junior division winners list. Karen, that's ridiculous. I demand to speak to whoever's in charge. My mom, I have the video right here on my phone. Would you like to see yourself stealing the cake from the junior division display? Karen's face went white. Apparently, my mom had come back early from lunch and caught the whole theft on video. She'd been recording the empty display area to show my relatives how my cake looked when Karen walked right into frame, picked up my cake, and carried it to the professional division. The head of security arrived with 2 other officers. The crowd had grown to hundreds of people, all watching as Karen tried to backpedal. Karen, this is all a misunderstanding. I thought this was my cake. They look very similar. Competition organizer, ma'am, this is the only 3-tiered butterfly garden cake in the entire competition, and we have you on video taking it. Head of security, please come with us. As they escorted her out, she was screaming about how unfair it was and how she'd been baking longer than I'd been alive. The competition organizer turned to me with an apologetic look. Competition organizer, we are so sorry about this. We've identified her through her competition registration. She'll be banned from all future county fair events, and we'll be sharing this incident with other regional fairs to prevent this from happening again. The story spread quickly through our small community. It turned out Karen had a history of taking credit for other people's work, not just in baking, but in other craft competitions too. She'd been getting away with it because most people were too intimidated to confront her. The fair committee made a public announcement about the incident and officially awarded me my prize during the ceremony. They even gave me an additional special recognition award for handling the situation maturely. My cake was featured in the local newspaper, and several local bakeries reached out to offer me apprenticeships for the summer. Karen tried to make a public apology on social media, claiming she'd been under stress and made a mistake, but nobody was buying it. The video of her stealing my cake had already gone viral in our local community Facebook groups. Last I heard, she moved to a different county because no one would hire her for catering anymore. As for me, I'm still baking. I've started taking orders for special occasions, and I'm saving up to open my own bakery someday just like my grandmother. But I always make sure to take plenty of progress pictures when I'm working on competition pieces now, just in case. Story 5. I never thought I'd be writing one of these stories, but here I am. As a retired military veteran who served 3 tours in Afghanistan, I've seen my share of difficult situations, but nothing quite prepared me for this encounter at a high-end restaurant last week. First, some context. After my last tour, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. The transition back to civilian life wasn't easy, and traditional therapy alone wasn't cutting it. That's when my Veterans Affairs counselor suggested I look into getting a service dog. Best decision I ever made. My service dog has been my constant companion for the past 2 years, helping me manage my anxiety and preventing panic attacks in crowded places. My service dog is a highly trained German Shepherd. He's certified, wears his service vest when working, and is honestly better behaved than most humans I know. He stays quietly under the table when we're dining out, and most people don't even realize he's there unless they specifically look for him. Last Friday, I decided to treat myself to dinner at this upscale steakhouse downtown. It was my birthday, and I just landed a promotion at work. The host was professional and seated us at a nice corner table. My service dog settled underneath, completely out of sight, and I was looking forward to a peaceful evening. I just received my appetizer when I heard someone shrieking from across the restaurant. Karen, oh my God, there's a dog in here. This is disgusting. I looked up to see a woman in her mid-40s, wearing what looked like designer clothes and sporting that infamous, "I want to speak to your manager" haircut, storming toward my table. Karen, you can't bring that filthy animal in here. This is a fine dining establishment. Me, ma'am, he's a service dog. Karen, I don't care what he is. I have severe allergies. You're putting my life at risk. She was standing about 10 feet away from my table, gesturing wildly and causing a scene. My service dog remained perfectly still under the table, trained to ignore distractions. Me, he's a certified service animal, and he's legally allowed to be here. Karen, manager, I need a manager right now. The restaurant manager, a well-dressed man probably in his 50s, quickly approached our table. Manager, is there a problem here? Karen, yes, this person has brought a dirty dog into your restaurant. I'm highly allergic, and I demand you remove them immediately. Manager, ma'am, I can see this is a service animal. They are protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act and are legally permitted in our establishment. Karen, I don't care about any act. My allergies are severe. I could die. It was worth noting that she had been dining on the opposite side of the restaurant and hadn't shown any signs of distress until she spotted my service dog. Manager, ma'am, if you're concerned about allergies, I'd be happy to reseat you in our private dining area, completely separated from this section. Karen, no, they need to leave. I was here first. Actually, I had arrived about 30 minutes before her, but I didn't bother pointing that out. Me, my service dog is necessary for my disability. He's clean, well-trained, and will remain under the table. Karen, oh, you don't look disabled to me. You're probably one of those people who bought a fake vest online. That's when things got really theatrical. She suddenly started making exaggerated gasping sounds and clutching her throat. Karen, wheeze, I can't breathe, cough, you're killing me, wheeze, She dramatically collapsed into an empty chair at a nearby table, while still somehow managing to shoot me dirty looks between her wheezes. Manager, ma'am, if you're having a medical emergency, I'll call an ambulance right away. Karen, yes, wheeze, and he's going to pay for it. Cough, this is all his fault. The manager signaled to one of the staff members, who called emergency services. Within minutes, 2 emergency medical technicians arrived. They began examining her while she continued her performance. First, ma'am, your oxygen levels are completely normal, and there are no signs of an allergic reaction. Karen, what do you know? I'm dying here. Second, ma'am, we are trained professionals. You are showing no physical symptoms of an allergic reaction. Your airways are clear, there's no swelling, and your vital signs are stable. Karen, this is ridiculous. I know my own body. She suddenly recovered and stood up, face red with anger rather than any medical distress. Karen, fine, but I'm not paying for this ambulance. This is all his fault for bringing that mutt in here. First, ma'am, falsely reporting a medical emergency is a serious offense. You will be receiving a bill for this service call. Karen, I will not pay, and I'm calling my lawyer. This restaurant will hear from them. I'll sue all of you. She stormed toward the exit, but stopped to yell over her shoulder. Karen, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of establishment this is, allowing dogs to contaminate the dining area. You'll be hearing from me. True to her word, she spent the next few days leaving multiple 1-star reviews online, posting on social media about her near-death experience, and calling the restaurant repeatedly to threaten legal action. She even tried to file a complaint with the health department. What she didn't expect was for the restaurant to take legal action first. They had everything on security cameras, including her fraudulent medical emergency. The manager compiled all her harassing calls, social media posts, and false reviews. Their lawyer sent her a cease and desist letter, along with notice that they were pursuing legal action for defamation and filing a false emergency report. The restaurant chain's corporate office got involved and issued her a lifetime ban from all their locations nationwide. They also countersued for damages to their reputation and the cost of dealing with her false complaints. The emergency medical services company separately billed her for the unnecessary ambulance call, and when she refused to pay, they sent it to collections. Last I heard, she's facing multiple legal issues and substantial fines. The restaurant manager told me she tried to come back last weekend with a wig and different clothes, but they recognized her and had security escort her out. As for me and my service dog, the restaurant gave us our meal on the house that night, and they've become one of our regular spots. The staff always welcomes us warmly, and my service dog continues to be the perfect dining companion, quiet, well-behaved, and thankfully, completely allergy-free.